I've wanted to see this movie since I saw the trailer. I was immediately here for it when I heard Joe say the line,
I'm so sick of people saying that love is just all a woman is fit for. I'm so sick of it.
I also really loved Lady Bird, which stars the same actress, Saoirse Ronan, and the same director and screenwriter, Greta Gerwig. However, I was wary because I thought it was just going to be a movie for white women, and as a person of color, I'm always apprehensive about white-centered female stories. But at the same time, I have an inner white girl in me myself. I love white period dramas like Marie Antoinette starring Kirsten Dunst, anything with Keira Knightley, specifically Anna Karenina, Jane Eyre with Michael Fassbender and Mia Wasikowska, and more recently Emma with Anya Taylor-Joy, and of course, The Crown. As someone who grew up pretty white and of course surrounded by white media and seeing white as default, I am pretty well versed in a lot of it and am very fond of it. Just because it's white doesn't mean it's bad, just that it usually is lacking certain perspectives and overshadowing marginalized stories. Like how many Little Women adaptations have there been? Well, according to The Hollywood Reporter, there have been at least 12 adaptations made for television. Not to mention the films that Little Women has inspired, such as a 1918 silent film, the 1933 adaptation starring Katharine Hepburn, the 1949 June Allison version, the 1994 Winona Ryder version, the 2018 Pureflix edition, and now the Greta Gerwig directed 2019 edition. The amount of historical dramas starring Black and Latin and Asian Americans are quite few and far between. Though there have been amazing ones and the landscape is slowly changing, there's still not enough. White stories have always been privileged and given money, especially Little Women, since it has been proven to make money time and time again. So I was skeptical going in, and that's why it honestly took me a year to finally watch this movie, but boy am I glad I did. Hey everyone, my name's Cheyenne and I'm an Asian American adoptee and expat living in Brazil. I post new pop culture commentary and reviews every Tuesday, so if you want to see those, please subscribe and ring the bell. So before I start my commentary on the movie and my review, let's first talk about the plot. So, the plot rundown. Little Women takes place during and after the American Civil War in the northeast of the United States, specifically New York City and Concord, Massachusetts. Fun fact, the film's set is inspired by Louisa May Alcott's childhood home. The characters the movie centers around are the four March sisters and their mother, who they call Marmee, who is a volunteer nurse for the Union as her husband fights on the battlefield. Her four daughters all have distinct dreams and personalities. There's Meg, the romantic, who marries for love rather than money. There's Joe, our main character, who is a headstrong and independent writer, and who never wants to get married. There's Beth, who loves to play the piano and is too good for this world, so she must die a tragic death. And there's Amy, the youngest sister, who dreams of marrying up, and who eventually does. The main tension of the movie comes from the drama between the sisters, particularly Joe and Amy, as they both are close to their rich next-door neighbor, Laurie. Amy has a crush on him, while Joe sees him as a friend, though he believes there's real romantic chemistry between them. Amy also dislikes Joe because she gets to do everything first, as she's the second oldest. Joe, on the other hand, resents Amy because she's the youngest and is foolish, spoiled, and gets to go to Europe with their wealthy widowed Aunt March. However, in the 7-year span of the film, we see the two main sisters grow and mature and begin to understand how the real world works and their place in it as women. They end up reconciling after a near-death experience and after the death of Beth. The two become adults and realize that they shouldn't fight over boys or because of a petty sibling rivalry, and they learn to mutually respect one another and their wishes. The end. So now that you know how the plot works, let's get into the themes and my own personal commentary. Before we get into the heavier subjects like marriage and feminism, let's first talk about structure and costuming. So number 1, the nonlinear structure of the film. Rather than the movie going in chronological order, Gerwig takes a big risk and tells this story non-linearly. The film juxtaposes various flashbacks with present-day scenes in order to compare where the women are now in their lives versus how they were when they were children. It is a bit confusing at first because you have adult actors pretending that they're ages 12 to 16 because the adult actors also play the child versions of themselves, but in all, I guess it's for the best. The flashbacks are also tinted with a color saturation filter, which is helpful because it delineates where the flashbacks are versus where the present day scenes are, because the present day scenes are filmed more realistically, whereas the flashbacks are filmed in a more dreamlike way. It wasn't until the first 40 minutes until I started to really get the flashbacks and their usage. For example, explaining why Jo resents Amy and why Amy still feels as though she's in Jo's shadow. But after those flashbacks were set in place, the story really got going. I loved how Gerwig contrasts the dancing between Jo and Laurie with Jo and Friedrich, the beach scenes, Beth's recovery and her death, and the funeral with the wedding. It's a movie you have to be patient with. It doesn't tell you everything right away, but it is so worth waiting for and very emotionally rewarding. So, number 2, the costuming. This movie won the Oscar for Best Costuming in 2020, this year, and I'm not a costume historian, so I don't know how accurate they were, but I thought that they looked great. I really love how they bundle up indoors and wear long underwear and really thick socks, because yeah, back then it would have been freaking cold. They also just look extremely cozy and very comfortable and natural in their environment. I also really love how they don't wear a lot of makeup. If any makeup, we get to see all of their imperfections, their acne, their scars, and their freckles and dark spots, etc. It's really refreshing, and it's also really nice to not see any of the women naked or get undressed. Like there's no gratuitous sex scene, which is usually mandatory in these historical dramas that I usually watch, but thank God there's none of that. There's absolutely no male gaze in this film. You can definitely tell that it was made by women for women. I also love that Gerwig inserts little slang here and there that is, I guess, contemporary to the time. For example, Jo always says, "That's capital," instead of "That's awesome." And she says Christopher Columbus instead of "Oh my God."
Christopher Columbus, look at that.
I think that's really cool and brilliant, honestly, and really sets you in the time period. The dialogue was really easy to follow in this film, when usually, historical dramas, when they use the contemporary talk of the day, it is usually kind of inaccessible, but this movie is very accessible with the way they talk. One movie that I'm thinking of in particular, it was Emma, which was really hard to follow for me personally. So I was really grateful that this movie was more accessible, while also staying true to the time period, of course. Overall, the film was nominated for 6 Oscars and won 1 for Best Costuming, which is great, but it really deserved an award for Best Acting. I mean, Saoirse Ronan really deserves her Best Actress Oscar, and Greta Gerwig really deserves her Best Directing Oscar. That was a legit snub. And I get it, while watching the beginning of this movie, it is just a bunch of girls squealing and laughing and being loud and obnoxious, and in the beginning, that bothered me. But then I recalibrated and reminded myself that they're children. They're kids, and they don't know what life is going to bring yet. So those flash forwards really make you appreciate the happier and lighthearted moments of them just being kids. Girls always have this immense pressure to not be like other girls and be quiet and courteous and good role models, but I'm glad for a few moments they can just be kids. But I also get how that would turn off a lot of male Academy voters, and why they wouldn't give this movie a chance, and that sucks. I think we all need to do a little bit of bias checking when watching female-centered movies, because we all have unconscious bias, and that can distract you from seeing the beauty that's right in front of you. So, number 3, being a daughter. Being a woman is obviously a big theme of this movie, but more specifically, the movie is about interpersonal female relationships, specifically between sisters and mothers and daughters. The reason why these 4 daughters are the center of the film is because it actually isn't a good thing that they are 4 daughters. Having 4 daughters is a hard task, and was specifically hard back then because they would all marry out. You would have to spend your time and money trying to find them a good match, and if your daughter was ugly and also poor, then you really had a big problem on your hands. Being a daughter in many cultures is seen as, like I said, a curse, but in the movie they don't linger on that too much, which I really liked, but they also don't shy away from the fact that there is this thing called filial responsibility. Gerwig is able to balance both beautifully. The girls aren't hated by their father or by their mother, they're loved and appreciated, and growing up in an all-female household actually makes them more confident and happy. And that's great to see. It's a great lesson for us to know that if we just nourish women the way that they're supposed to be nourished, that they will grow up into full human beings, and that if we see them as people, it's not the worst thing in the world. And as someone who grew up in an all-female household, it is really just nice not to have men around. Like, there are almost no men in this film, and I love it. But of course, Gerwig doesn't shy away from the reality that girls need to marry, and how that's a burden, and also the fact that beauty is a commodity. Amy is her family's last hope, as Aunt March puts it.
It'll be up to you to support them all, and your indigent parents in their old age. So you must marry well.
Amy is young, beautiful, and blonde and has privilege in the marriage market, and that's why Aunt March chooses her over Joe when she goes to Europe, besides the fact that Joe is a hopeless case. Amy learns that marriage is an economic proposition. She says in the movie that she always knew that she would marry rich, and when she does, it's not just to secure her own position in society, but to eventually use her husband's money to help her family. And that may seem backward and antiquated, but that's what women had to do back then. We learn in the movie that women can't own property, can't inherit wealth from their fathers, and that it's incredibly hard to be a female entrepreneur, if not impossible. The most viable way for women to acquire capital is to marry into it, as seen with Aunt March, and unfortunately, that's still true today. Many women have to marry for money, and it's great that Amy and Laurie love each other and that he's also rich, but for a lot of women, they have to sacrifice their own happiness and sometimes suffer abuse in the name of financial security. We don't see that in the movie, as Meg's marriage to a poor tutor is still a happy one with no resentment or abuse, but still, the movie shows that it's really hard to be poor, and how being poor isn't necessarily purer or easier than being rich. In fact, in the movie, all the rich people are extremely benevolent, and we learn that being rich is actually something to aspire to because it means financial security, and yeah, that's true. So, number 4, marriage and choosing to be single. Marriage is an ever-pervasive theme in all women's lives. Even from when girls are children, they're told that ending up married to a man is their happily ever after. As girls mature, they're constantly asked when they'll get married, to whom they'll get married, and of course, when are they going to have children. It's a real chore in a woman's life to fend off these pesky questions, and it's shown very realistically in Little Women, where all Aunt March cares about is when the girls will get married and to who. Of course, she doesn't do this because she's trying to be a bitch, but rather because she genuinely cares and is trying to look out for them. She knows how marrying rich can change a woman's life, and she tries her best to impart her wisdom onto her nieces. However, Joe totally disregards Aunt March and is stubborn not only on the subject of marriage, but also to make herself look presentable. Joe doesn't present as typically feminine all the time. She doesn't care about fancy dresses and balls and doing her hair. And she does this to make it clear that she is not looking for a suitor. Although this does draw the attention of Laurie, as she's not like other girls, but we'll get to that later. Meg, on the other hand, does want to get married. Aunt March sends her to the debutante ball to meet potential suitors, where Laurie is there for some reason and is just an ass to her, but then he apologizes and lets her enjoy her fairy tale. She later marries a poor tutor, and though unhappy with being poor, still loves him and decides to sacrifice upper-class living for a more humble existence. On Meg's wedding day, Joe asks her to run away with her. It's actually quite a romantic gesture and shows that Joe's just truly in love with her sisters and wants to do what Aunt March does, impart her own wisdom. But Meg reasonably says that just because her dream is different from Joe's doesn't mean that it's unimportant. Just because she wants to get married and have children doesn't mean that her choice is any less revolutionary than Joe's. Marrying for love and not wealth is really defiant because it means that your life probably is going to be really freaking hard, but it's nice to think that true love really exists out there for some people and that people are willing to struggle together. And it's not always pretty or happy, but Meg is willing to do the work. And though I find it maybe somewhat problematic that Meg gives up so much for her man, it is her choice, and women should be allowed to make those choices. The last in the family to get married is Amy. As I said before, from a young age, Amy realizes that she needs to marry wealthy if she's ever to leave the middle class. Her and her aunt's goals are the same, to get Amy a good match. However, Aunt March adds in another layer, that of responsibility to her family. Amy is the last and only daughter who could be of use to her family, and she is only useful in that she can marry rich. Though this is a lot of pressure, she doesn't take the responsibility lightly and fully recognizes that it's up to her to take care of her sisters and her parents in their old age. However, she ends up breaking off the proposal with the wealthy English suitor because she doesn't love him, and that it wouldn't be fair to either of them. But she only does that because Laurie proposed to her just a day earlier, but then she rejected him because she knows that Laurie only wants her because he couldn't have Joe. She, I guess, has a change of heart somewhere between proposals and decides that if Laurie is willing to settle for her, then she's willing to settle for him. And this brings me to my 5th point, Amy and Laurie. Laurie shows that rich men literally have nothing better to do than just F with women's lives. I didn't understand if we were supposed to like Laurie or not, but I honestly really dislike him, and I really dislike that Amy accepted his proposal. She gives this really empowering speech about how she doesn't want to marry him and that she is not happy with being his second choice. But then she does this whole 180 and is like, I guess I'll marry him anyway. And that's fine, I guess, because he is a family friend and he's also rich. So it is very obvious that he'll help the Marches out financially. But at the same time, it's like, how could you do that to Joe? And obviously, Amy cannot read Joe's mind, doesn't really know that she had a change of heart about him or that she feels some type of way about him, even though in my head canon, Joe doesn't actually have feelings for Laurie. But anyway, I get that she can't read Joe's mind, but it's like, what kind of sister would even think about marrying their sister's past crush? And not only your sister's past crush, but also someone who thought that you were second rate. I just don't get it. But I guess in the end, sister love does triumph over everything. And in the end, Laurie and Amy are truly made for each other because they are both second best. And in the end, I also am happy that Joe doesn't end up with Laurie. I just personally wish that he would just get out of their lives altogether. But they do need that money and that financial security, and that brings me to my 6th point, and that is class. So, number 6, class. In the beginning of the movie, we see the girls complaining about how they're not getting any Christmas presents this year and how poor they are, and I was like, they're not poor. But then we realize that this is actually set up for a later scene when they need to give up their Christmas breakfast and give it to the Hummels, an actual family living in poverty and dying of illness. This setup is to make the girls realize how lucky and privileged they are, and of course to set up how Beth later contracts scarlet fever and ends up dying. But though the Marches are middle class, it's important to note that they are not wealthy. Meg only has one fancy dress, and they constantly need to depend on the kindness of their neighbors, such as Laurie's rich grandpa, and of course their Aunt March. But what I want to know is, why can't the grandpa and Aunt March help the girls out more? They could probably clothe, feed, house, and educate all of the women, but they choose not to. I guess it would be because of tax reasons and also break social protocol, but I really just don't get it. I mean, these two old rich people live in gigantic houses all by themselves. I just don't get it. I mean, I'm sure it would also be too progressive for the time. But the character of Laurie's grandpa specifically does bring up the problem that people who are poor or in the middle class constantly have to depend on rich people who are usually old rich men who only help out women because they remind them of their daughters. The help the Marches get isn't patronizing, pitying. They are actually genuinely trying to help these people, and it is greatly appreciated, but there's also a power dynamic there that just can be so insidious. Good thing Laurie's grandpa is just a nice, kind, sweet, gentle old millionaire and doesn't want anything in return. But I think that showcasing this dependency on rich people, specifically rich older men, really highlights another theme in the movie that is equally important, and that is being independent as a woman, and being independent in every sense of the word, being independent from partners and also financially. And this, of course, leads me to my 7th point, which is Joe. Joe is the best character in the film, and the best written female character I've seen in a long while. She's strong-headed, stubborn, independent, and of course not like other girls, but she is also every other girl. The story could have been so contrived, showing that Joe is a tomboy and better than all the other girls because she wants to do boy stuff and not marry and cut her hair, but rather Gerwig writes Joe like a real woman. She doesn't think that her way of living is better than other people's. In fact, she constantly is confronted with the idea that maybe marriage or being a housewife could lead to happiness, and maybe that she's wrong. When she cuts her hair, she's happy and smiley about it and makes a big sacrifice, but she's also shown to be sad about it too. She misses her hair, and that's okay. No woman or human is 100% perfect all of the time, and Jo definitely isn't. When she gives her big speech about how she's sick of women just being seen as objects to be passed around or to worship men, she also says that she wants to be loved and that she's lonely.
Women, they have minds, and they have souls, as well as just hearts. And they've got ambition, and they've got talent, as well as just beauty. And I'm so sick of people saying that love is just all a woman is fit for. I'm so sick of it. But I'm so lonely.
It's an incredibly sensitive but raw and real moment a lot of women face. A lot of women go into marriage or have children simply because they want to be loved unconditionally, when that's extremely unrealistic. This is partially because women are told that their goal in life is to be loved by a man and be desired by a man, but also because we as humans just want to be hugged at the end of the day. And though Jo ultimately enjoys being single and having her freedom, she also realizes that her choice isn't easy, and it's actually really hard, and it is constantly challenged, not just by others, but by her own feelings. But at the end of the day, Jo's conviction is strong. She staunchly doesn't get married and never wavers. It's just amazing and refreshing to see a woman so strong in their ideations and beliefs. Jo is a real hero, and I'm so glad that Gerwig wrote her the way she did. And it's not like Jo repulses men. In fact, they're quite attracted to her. Like I said before, Laurie is in love with Jo's rebellious nature and even proposes to her. But she turns him down, and it's perfect. Laurie goes on this long rant about how he's waited for her and that he loves her and how he thought that she felt the same way, and she says something to the effect of, "I can't love you the way you love me. I just can't, and I can't explain it." And I think that's freaking brilliant. I think so many women fall for men just because they feel like they have to, but Jo doesn't. Later, however, Jo has a change of heart. After Beth dies, she starts to feel unloved and decides to write a love letter to Laurie confessing her feelings. And I honestly really hated that part, but I like to think that Jo only wrote that letter out of desperation and sadness and not because she actually had hidden feelings for Laurie. And though I hated that part, I also get it. We've all been there. We've all kept unsaid feelings for someone and wondered what would happen if things had been different, and that's a real part of life. Usually, it isn't as haunting as having them as a brother-in-law, but in the end, Jo takes it with grace. After she finds out that Amy and Laurie are married, she's happy for them and throws away the letter. Learning to let go of a first love is hard, but it's freaking real. It's even harder when you have to put another woman's happiness over your own, as women are constantly in competition with one another for men, but that's a lesson I think we can all learn from. And by the end of the movie, you can either think that Jo ended up with Friedrich or remained single. And, of course, I like to think that Jo remained single, but it's nice that they leave it open-ended for the viewer. So, number 8, Beth is the true love story. Though the love triangle with Laurie does seem to really be the focus of this movie, it really isn't the main love story. The main love story is with Jo and Beth with her other sisters. Beth and Jo have a really intense relationship. Jo cared for her when Beth was sick with scarlet fever the first time and helped her recover, and Jo has always respected and loved and cared for Beth. Beth also helps her sisters in that they all aspire to be as good as her, and she also holds the family together as the family centers around her goodness. Beth is the reason why Jo exists. Jo's whole life revolves around her sister, making money to take care of her, leaving her job to take care of her, and of course, Beth is also a distraction for Jo. Jo uses her whenever she feels lonely or whenever she's feeling unloved. Beth helps Jo feel whole, and when she dies, the speech about being lonely is triggered, and Jo starts to question her life choices and being single. This is a short point, but I think it's crucial to understanding the movie, because I think on the surface it seems to be all about the men and who the women marry or don't marry or who they love or don't love. But in actuality, Beth and her sisters are Jo's true love. They're what makes her happy and feel valued. And I think that's important because female relationships are put second in a lot of women's lives, because we're told to cater to men and to cling on to men. But we shouldn't forget all the women in our lives who care about us, not as lovers or partners or status symbols, but for who we are. So number 9, and my last point, women are people. Another thing I love about this movie is that it proves everything I've ever believed, and it's that women are human and that their stories matter. Gerwig writes women so realistically. Jo isn't a robot with no feelings and someone who hates girly stuff. She cries about her hair, she's allowed to be lonely, and she values women's lives. She doesn't write about big happenings in the war or the big city. She writes about things that seem unimportant, the domestic, women's lives, and their drama, which has been so often written off as frivolous or petty, but that actually are the most common things people experience. Women in the movie are allowed to be naive and girly and imperfect. They're also able to grow, learn, and mature. They're not seen as petty or cruel, but just humans who make mistakes and hide their feelings and act out, but not because they're irrational, but because they're complex. As Jo says, and as Gerwig so perfectly illustrates in her film, women have minds and they have souls as well as just hearts, and they've got ambition and they've got talent as well as just beauty. In the end, when Jo talks about her novel to her sisters, she says that she doesn't believe that anyone will care because in the patriarchal world they're living in, only men's stories and accomplishments are valued. And that's biting commentary, not only of their world, but of our modern one. Oscar bait stories usually center around men. Men and their guns, men and their wars, men and their gangs, men and their cars, and men in world-changing events, and of course, guys just being dudes. Women's stories to this day are seen as less important because the stakes are seemingly lower. The plot usually revolves around someone's marriage, or their dating life, or their kids, or their relationships with other women, but those aren't low-stakes stories. And just because it's commonplace and doesn't put thousands of lives on the line, doesn't make it any less important. There should be more sensitive stories about men's lives and women's lives because that's actually what most people can relate to. Most people don't experience war or drive extremely fast cars. There's a great line where Amy says, "Perhaps writing about them will make them important." And it's true. I make my videos because this is the stuff that matters to me. And though it probably doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, I think the only way to gauge that is to see what others think. And in the end, people do care about Jo's novel. And that matters. So my final thoughts. I think when we think of women and their happy ending, we see them like Amy, with a rich husband, with kids, and, typically feminine. But Jo does have it all. She has her work, and she has her independence, and she's fulfilled by both of those. And, I think it's great that they leave the ending open so you can think that she gets with Friedrich or not, but I like to think that she remains unattached. She is able to have a happy ending without a man, and I think that is extremely radical, even today, and I think that lesson needs to reach as many girls as possible, to know that they can be fulfilled and happy without men in their lives. The movie shows that being fulfilled and having your happy ending comes in all shapes and sizes. You can marry for love and be poor, and you can be married for convenience and be rich. Of course, no one should be poor, and that honestly really irks me about Meg's story, and I don't really like her story that much, but she does seem to really love him, so I guess it's fine. I think it's great that we can have it all as long as we recognize that having it all comes in different forms. In all, it was really refreshing to see this on screen, and it is somewhat sad but also kind of amazing that this story still rings true more than 100 years later. So if you haven't seen it already, go check it out. So yeah, that's it for this week's video. Go check out the movie if you haven't already, or if you're curious to watch it. I didn't talk about race that much, but it's really not in the movie that much. I mean, there's one line that a woman says that she's ashamed of this country, and the March's mom goes that she is too, and it's really like, the Marches are not racist. Like, this is not a movie about race. But as a woman of color, I still enjoyed it, so if, this video speaks to you, go check it out, but don't feel any pressure to watch it if you don't want to. So yeah, that's it. My next video on next Tuesday is going to be about Mulan 2020, the Disney Plus remake, or the Disney remake, I guess it's on Disney Plus. Anyway, so yeah, be ready for that one. I'm excited to watch it, and I'll see you all next Tuesday.